US troops are arriving in Poland to strengthen NATO's presence in Eastern Europe amid the Ukraine crisis. 3,000 additional troops will be stationed in Poland and Romania to provide protection from potential Russian aggression. Russia's military buildup has seen jitters sent through NATO's Eastern European members who fear that Moscow is preparing to attack. But the Kremlin insists there is no plan to invade Ukraine and says the presence of NATO troops will only increase tensions. As the threat of war looms large over Ukraine, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is headed to Washington. His mission to reassure President Biden that Berlin has his and the rest of the NATO allies back in the increasingly tense standoff with Russia. People in Ukraine are preparing for the worst.
She's a chemist by training, a soldier by necessity. We have to be ready for a Russian attack. We can't just stand by and watch. We have to defend our borders and the future of our nation. With Russian forces amassing on Ukraine's border, Yana has put down her pipette and picked up an automatic rifle. For weeks, she's been meeting regularly with other civilians for military training on the outskirts of the Ukrainian capital. Their aim, to defend their country and their loved ones against another Russian invasion. With its military no match for Moscow's and its Western allies ruling out joining Ukrainian forces on the front lines, Kiev is increasingly looking to its civilians to fight back. For many here, it's a scenario they've been preparing for since Russia annexed Crimea. Ukraine has been in a state of war since 2014. Some of my friends have not returned from the front, and I'm constantly thinking about it. It touches every family. We're not just preparing for an attack, it's happening already. We're not preparing for anything. This is simply our life. While volunteers in Western Ukraine are being taught the basics of battle, thousands of residents have taken to the streets of Kharkiv in the east. Many fear the country's second largest city, just 40 kilometers from the Russian border, could be the first to be invaded by Putin's forces. The people here want to send a clear message to Moscow that although they're close to Russia, there are no questions about their loyalty. Kharkiv is a Ukrainian city, and we will not surrender it. I want to say hi to Putin and tell him, Putin, wage war against yourself and your stupidity. Just over a week ago, the Ukrainian president warned his Western allies against overstating the likelihood of war. It seems that's a luxury few here in Ukraine feel they can afford.
And let's bring in DW's correspondent Marina Strauss. Marina, the US estimates Russia would have the entire force it needs to invade Ukraine by mid-February. Does the EU and NATO agree with that assessment?
The EU and NATO, both institutions here in Brussels, have not reacted to this assessment yet. It's also a Sunday morning, so maybe there's more to come a bit later or at the beginning of the week. But both institutions here in Brussels, NATO and the EU, say they are, of course, prepared for every possible scenario. For example, when Russia really decided to invade Ukraine, the EU, of course, is not doesn't really have military power here, but they say they have prepared a set of sanctions in case Russia really tries to move forward.
Well, the US bolstering troops by 3,000, sending 3,000 US soldiers to European allies in Eastern Europe. But I mean, that's in comparison to more than 100,000 on the Russian side. What is the US and NATO hoping to achieve with such a small deployment?
The Biden administration says the troops are actually enough to deploy a wide range of actions, including setting a full-scale invasion to capture Kiev, for example. So apparently they are prepared, or at least that's what the Biden administration says. And of course, the number of troops the NATO and the US are deploying right now is not the only the troops at the eastern flank of the European Union. There are already troops stationed in Poland, in Lithuania, in Latvia, and in Estonia, because this is really the eastern flank of the European Union, close to Belarus, close to Russia, and they have been stationed there since the annexation of Crimea a couple of years ago.
Do those troops, does that troop presence and in fact the increased troop presence from the US assuage fears on the European side? I mean, how have Eastern European countries been responding?
Eastern European countries are in general very fearful when it comes to what they call a Russian provocation. And in Poland, for example, the mood is very positive towards NATO and towards US troops. I said there are already troops stationed there. And I once traveled to Poland, close to the border with close to the border with Belarus and Kaliningrad, the Russian exclave, and there people told me they're very favorable of US troops being stationed there. They feel more safe if the US is stationed there. And of course, with this new threat of Russia possibly trying to invade Ukraine, these countries in the EU at the eastern flank are also more fearful of possible provocations or even invasions in the future by the Russian side.
All right, Marina, thank you. DW Brussels correspondent Marina Strauss.